The old house sat on a quiet street, nestled amongst mature oak trees. Its paint was a little faded, the porch swing creaked a welcome, and the garden, while beloved, had a charming wildness about it. This was Thomas Vance's home, the place where he had lived for 40 years, first with his wife Eleanor, and for the last 5, alone since she'd passed away. Thomas was a man who found comfort in routine: morning coffee on the porch, a walk to the local library, afternoons spent tending his roses or reading in his favorite armchair. The quiet rhythm of a life lived simply. Thomas had 2 children, both grown with lives of their own. His daughter, Sarah, lived with her family in a neighboring town, visiting often, always checking in. His son, Edward, a successful lawyer, lived in the city a few hours away. Edward's visits were less frequent, dictated by a demanding career and a busy social life. Thomas understood. The city was a different world, faster, louder. He was proud of Edward's accomplishments, even if their lives had diverged so completely. Lately, something unsettling had begun to creep into Thomas's quiet world. Small things at first: misplaced keys, forgetting an appointment, a moment of confusion about the day of the week. He'd dismiss them as simple signs of age, the mind slowing down, nothing to worry about. But then the episodes became more pronounced, more frightening. One afternoon, he'd walked to the market, a route he'd taken hundreds of times. Halfway there, a wave of disorientation washed over him. He looked around, the familiar street suddenly alien. The faces of passers-by seemed distant, the sounds of traffic muted. He felt a prickle of panic, a chilling sense of being lost in a place he knew intimately. He couldn't recall where he was going, or why. He stood on the sidewalk, confused and frightened, until a kind neighbor, Mrs. Gable, recognized him and gently guided him the rest of the way, asking concerned questions Thomas struggled to answer coherently. Mrs. Gable called Sarah that evening, expressing her worry. Sarah, bless her heart, had driven over immediately, her face a mask of concern she tried to hide. They talked, Sarah asking gentle questions, Thomas downplaying the incident, attributing it to a dizzy spell, fatigue. But later, when he thought he was alone, he caught Sarah watching him, a troubled look in her eyes. She made him promise to see his doctor. He agreed just to ease her mind, but the thought of it filled him with a vague dread. What would the doctor find? The visit to Dr. Albright was unsettling. There were tests, questions that felt strangely difficult to answer, a sense of being assessed, weighed, found wanting. Dr. Albright was kind, her voice soft, but her expression was serious. She spoke of cognitive function, of memory impairment, words that felt clinical and cold. She recommended further evaluation, specialists. Thomas left the office feeling hollow, a fear he couldn't name taking root in his heart. He didn't tell Edward the full extent of the doctor's visit, only that Dr. Albright wanted more tests. Edward, busy with a major case at work, listened with concern, but the distance, the demands of his life felt like a barrier. He promised to call, promised to visit soon. A few weeks later, the phone rang. It was Edward. "Dad," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of excitement and nerves. "I have some news. Big news. I'm getting married." He paused, then rushed on. "To Clara. You met her briefly last Christmas, remember?" Thomas fumbled with the memory. Clara, a tall, elegant woman, sharp eyes, spoke about city life, seemed very modern. He'd been preoccupied with a leaky faucet that Christmas. He vaguely remembered a polite handshake, a sense of her assessing glance. "Clara," Thomas repeated, the name triggering a faint image. Yes, yes, I remember. That's wonderful news, son. Congratulations." He genuinely was happy for Edward, thrilled he'd found someone. "Thanks, Dad," Edward said, relief in his voice. "We're planning a small wedding here in the city in 3 months. Very low-key. And of course we want you there. We wouldn't have it any other way." "Of course," Thomas replied, his heart swelling with love for his son. "I'll be there." He pictured himself, perhaps a little unsteady, trying to navigate a room full of elegant strangers, struggling to keep up with conversations. A familiar wave of anxiety washed over him. Could he manage it? Would he embarrass Edward? Over the next few months, the episodes of confusion became more frequent. He'd forget where he put his glasses, even when they were on his head. He'd start a sentence and lose the thread. He'd confuse names, mixing up neighbors, sometimes even his own children in moments of panic. Sarah visited often, her worry growing with each visit. She helped him sort bills, reminded him of appointments, her presence a steadying force. She gently raised the possibility of more help, maybe someone coming in a few hours a day. Thomas resisted, clinging to his independence, terrified of becoming a burden. Edward called regularly, busy with wedding preparations. He asked about Thomas, but Thomas, ever the proud father, downplayed his difficulties, painting a picture of quiet contentment. He didn't want to worry his son, not now, with so much happiness on the horizon. As the wedding day approached, Thomas's anxiety intensified. He'd had another bad episode just yesterday, forgetting he'd already eaten breakfast, getting agitated when Sarah tried to remind him. He felt the ground shifting beneath him, the world becoming a place of unpredictable gaps and confusing moments. He thought of Edward's elegant fiancée, Clara, so composed, so capable. He imagined himself at the wedding, saying something inappropriate, getting lost, perhaps having one of those frightening episodes in front of everyone. The thought was unbearable. He couldn't risk ruining Edward's special day. With a heavy heart, he called Edward the week before the wedding. "Son," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "about the wedding, I don't think I can make it." Edward was silent for a moment. "Dad, what? Why not? Are you feeling all right?" Yes, I'm fine," Thomas lied, his throat tight. "Just a bit under the weather. Don't want to pass anything on. And, well, the trip, the city, it's a bit much these days. Too noisy." He hated lying, but he saw no other way. He painted a picture of a frail old man, tired and preferring the quiet of his own home. Edward sounded disappointed, but understanding. "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry. We'll miss you terribly. Clara will be sad too." He paused. "Are you sure? We could arrange transport, someone to stay with you." "No, son, no," Thomas insisted, perhaps too quickly. "Really, it's for the best. You go. Have a wonderful day, you and Clara. That's what matters." They talked a little longer, Thomas reinforcing his decision, Edward reluctantly accepting it. After they hung up, Thomas sat in silence, the weight of his choice heavy in the air. It was for Edward's happiness, he told himself, for his peace of mind. The morning of the wedding arrived. Thomas woke early, the house quiet. The sun was shining, a beautiful day for a wedding. He felt a pang of sorrow, imagining Edward, handsome in his suit, Clara, radiant in her dress. He hoped wherever they were celebrating, the day was perfect. He made his coffee, sat on the porch swing, watching the world wake up. He was alone, but he was safe. He hadn't ruined anything. Around 10 o'clock, a car pulled into his driveway. It was a dark sedan, not Edward's usual car. Thomas watched as Edward got out, dressed in a suit, looking sharp. And then he saw Clara emerge from the passenger side, wearing a lovely dress, her hair elegantly styled. Thomas's heart pounded. Why were they here? The wedding was today, in the city. Had something gone wrong? Edward and Clara walked up the path, smiling, though Edward's smile seemed a little strained. Thomas stood from the swing, confused. "Edward? Clara? What are you doing here? The wedding?" "Dad," Edward said, reaching the porch. "We're here to pick you up." "Pick me up?" Thomas felt a wave of confusion, then a jolt of fear. Pick him up. He hadn't changed his mind about the wedding. Had Sarah called them? Had they decided he couldn't be left alone anymore? His mind, already prone to anxiety, jumped to the worst conclusion. This wasn't about the wedding. This was about his forgetfulness, the doctor's visits. This was about him being a burden. And Clara, he met Clara's steady gaze, saw her composure. She was pragmatic, efficient. This must have been her idea, the practical solution, a nursing home. They were here to take him to a nursing home. Panic flared in his chest, sharp and cold. He looked from Edward's kind but determined face to Clara's calm, assessing one. His breath quickened. I'm not going," Thomas stammered, backing slightly toward the door. "I told you, I'm not feeling well. I'm staying here." Edward stepped forward gently. "Dad, we know you haven't been feeling well. We've been worried." He paused, looking at Clara, who gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Dr. Albright called me after your last visit. She told me about the diagnosis, about the dementia." Thomas's knees felt weak. They knew. The secret fear he'd been trying to hide was out. And, and Clara and I have been talking," Edward continued, his voice soft but firm. "A lot, especially after you said you weren't coming to the wedding." Thomas braced himself. Here it came. The explanation. Why this was necessary. Why he couldn't stay in his home anymore. He looked at Clara again, seeing only cool practicality. He was a problem to be solved, a responsibility to be managed. He felt a surge of resentment towards her. It was her life Edward was starting now. His illness would be an inconvenience. "We realized," Edward said, stepping closer, reaching for Thomas's hand, "that if you're not well enough to come to us for a few hours for the most important day of my life, then you're not well enough to be here alone anymore." Thomas's heart sank. He was right. This was it. He pulled his hand back, his voice shaky. "I understand. You don't have to sugarcoat it. I'm a burden. I know." He looked directly at Clara, his voice tinged with a sadness that bordered on accusation. "I'm sure Clara agrees. It's the practical thing to do, the sensible solution." Clara stepped forward then, her expression softening. She didn't look practical or cold. She looked kind. She reached out, not for his hand, but gently touched his arm. "Mr. Vance," she said softly, her voice warm, erasing the cool image he held of her. "Thomas, no one thinks you're a burden." Thomas looked at her, confused. "When Edward told me what the doctor said," Clara continued, her gaze steady and compassionate, "and then when he told me you weren't coming to the wedding because you were afraid of things being difficult, my heart ached for you both." She looked at Edward, a deep affection passing between them. "Edward loves you very much, and he needs you, now more than ever." She turned back to Thomas. "We talked about options, of course. We want what's best for you, what's safest. But when Edward said you weren't coming because you thought you'd be a burden, we realized the last thing you need is to be in a place surrounded by strangers, feeling unwanted." Edward took his father's hand again, holding it gently this time. "Dad, we're not taking you to a nursing home." Thomas stared at him, disbelief warring with hope. "We're taking you home," Edward said, his eyes shining with love. "Our home. Clara and I. We want you to come live with us. It's a big house. There's plenty of room. We'll hire help, yes, someone who knows how to manage things. Keep a routine, but you'll be with us. With family." He squeezed Thomas's hand. "We need you, Dad. We want you there. Not just today, but every day." Clara smiled, a genuine, open smile. "Thomas, I know we haven't had much time together, but I see the man Edward loves. I see the wonderful father who raised him. You are family, and family takes care of each other. We want you with us, truly." Tears welled in Thomas's eyes, blurring the edges of the porch, the garden, the faces of his son and future daughter-in-law. The fear, the anxiety, the crushing weight of feeling like a burden lifted, replaced by an overwhelming flood of relief, gratitude, and a love so profound it stole his breath. He had misjudged Clara entirely. He had let his illness, his fear, cloud his vision, making him see only practicality where there was deep compassion. "Live with you?" he whispered, the words foreign, hopeful. "Yes, Dad," Edward said, pulling him into a warm embrace. "Come home. Our home is your home now." Clara joined the hug, her arms wrapping around both men, a new family embracing its future, challenges and all, together. Thomas moved into Edward and Clara's spacious city home that week. The wedding was a beautiful, joyful affair, held in their garden. Thomas was there, not as a burden, but as the honored patriarch seated in the front row, watching his son marry the woman who had, with quiet grace and compassion, welcomed him into their life. There were moments of confusion, yes, whispers to Edward asking where he was, who certain guests were, but Edward and Clara handled it with such love and patience, gently guiding him, ensuring he felt safe and included. Life with dementia wasn't easy. There were difficult days, moments of frustration and disorientation. But Thomas was never alone. Edward was there, his steady presence a comfort. Clara was there, managing the household with efficiency, yes, but also with immense warmth and genuine affection for Thomas, anticipating his needs, patiently repeating explanations. Her initial composure now seen not as coldness, but as quiet strength and calm in the face of difficulty. They hired a kind, experienced caregiver who came during the day, ensuring Thomas had companionship and support while Edward and Clara were at work. Thomas's world had shrunk in some ways, but it had also expanded, embracing him in the warmth of a loving home he hadn't expected. He still had days where memories were hazy, where confusion reigned, but he also had moments of perfect clarity, moments spent laughing with Edward over old stories, moments of quiet connection with Clara as they shared a cup of tea, moments watching them together, seeing the deep love between them and feeling a profound sense of peace and gratitude. His fear of being a burden had been replaced by the certainty of being loved, cherished, and wanted. His home wasn't just a building, it was the circle of love created by his family. And in his final years, surrounded by the constant care and affection of his son and the woman he had once so terribly misjudged, Thomas found a peace deeper than any he had known before, a testament to the enduring strength of family bonds and the quiet power of unconditional love.